All right, chapter 32. Vector-borne and soil-borne bacterial and viral diseases. Okay, notice those two words there. Vector-borne and soil-borne. Okay, these are not going to be communicable person to person. These are not going to be things that you normally would ingest. Those are other chapters. So we're looking at our infections that we're normally going to term zoonotic or zoonosis. These are something that's out there infecting animals. And then somehow, within the past few years, few centuries, the past few millennia, maybe even longer, transmitted to humans due to either bite, close proximity. So the reservoir, this is where if you wanted to isolate, this is where you would go to look for it. Not in humans. This is going to be more of a, this is out there in animals where it may be very deadly to us. Since they're the reservoir, it's mild to them if they even register, their bodies register that it is infecting them. How we get it, these zoonoses, direct contact, okay? Direct contact means we're in close proximity. You're petting them, they're in and around you, in and around your living spaces. Aerosols, turns out we inhale a lot of things from animals. Just think about it. There are a few diseases that we're not going to talk about in this chapter, but I'm going to use as an example. One of them is Mycobacterium avium. It's an AIDS pathogen, something that AIDS patients have to be wary of. Why do they have to be wary of? Well, because it's an aerosol. They breathe in the bacteria, causes them a killer pneumonia. Thing is, based on its name, avium, it is a bird bacteria. It doesn't bother the birds. It's something they carry around. They pass it out in their feces. Well, how do we breathe it in? Well, feces dry up. Feces becomes dust. You breathe in the dust. Excuse me, hence an aerosol. And then bites. Either they're going in for blood meal or they're biting you as a, hey, get away from me, you scare me type of thing. We see that if it is a zoonotic, the zoonotic diseases fall into two camps, enzootic or epizootic. If it's endemic, meaning basically all of them in this species have it, it just really doesn't bother them. It's something they carry around as normal. It's endemic. All of them get it. All of them survive. All of them just carry it. It's just there. It's part of their normal flora. Epizootic means it's an epidemic. It's not normally there, but suddenly now it is. It's in these animals. It's going gangbusters. Because those animals are in close proximity to us, we're going to get exposed. And at some point in time, it's going to jump from them to us. First one we're going to talk about is honestly one of my favorites. I don't know why. I get giddy. It just like a little schoolboy. Ooh, like a little kid. I like this. Rabies. It's an epizootic disease, okay? It's not endemic. Um, it pops up. Numbers go up in a given, area, given region in certain animals. We get it because we're exposed to those animals. They spread it animal to animal, and then indirectly, some point in time, we come into contact with them. They bite us. Or wild animal to one of our pets, your dog, your cat. Once they're sick, they lash out, they bite you. Now you get it. Here in the States, Whenever you say rabies, people automatically think bats, 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 bats. Not as often as you think. Depending upon which region of the U.S. you're from, better chance it's raccoons, skunks, coyotes, and foxes. Why raccoons, skunks, coyotes, and foxes? They eat other things. Many other mammals, because this is a mammalian thing, many other mammals run. You know, they run away. Whereas raccoons, skunks, coyotes, foxes, they're chasing stuff down. They're coming into contact with stuff. They're also in high enough numbers in certain places that they're going to fight for territory. They bite, they scratch each other, and there it goes. So, different regions: Southeast, Midwest, Rockies, West Coast, Northeast, Northern Midwest versus Southern Midwest. Different regions, different reservoirs. And people seem to think that this is something we don't have to worry about. In actuality, no. This is still a pretty good killer. 60,000 people per year. Even though we really have a pretty good treatment regimen for it. 60,000 people worldwide still die of it. Most of these people are going to be third world countries. Not very many people here in the US or Western Europe die from this because we're now so ingrained in our medicine that if you think you've been bitten, whether or not you know for sure or not for sure that that animal, that bat, that coyote, that rat, whatever that bit you may or may not have rabies, they're going to give you the rabies vaccine. The idea is that, well, that's one of the treatments. The primary treatment is upon exposure, within a few days of exposure, they're going to give you the vaccine. How's the vaccine a treatment, you may say? Well, it takes multiple months, couple of months, usually 2 to 4 months or so, for people who've been exposed to rabies to start manifesting the signs and the symptoms associated with rabies. It takes about 3 to 4 weeks for you to mount an immune response to the vaccine. So they give you the vaccine, you start mounting an immune response while your rabies slowly progresses. Well, boom, you now have a really healthy response that goes, attacks, beats down, gets rid of the rabies before you actually even start showing symptoms. And when you go and you look, domesticated animals for the past 4, 5, 6 decades, we've had a pretty good regimen going of treating our domesticated animals. Yes, are there some that are going to get exposed? Yeah, because they're out running around. You let your dog go run around in the field, it's going to chase something. Well, sometimes that something's going to turn around and fight back. But most municipalities here in the States have laws. Your dogs, your cats have to be, get their shots once a year, rabies vaccine. Keep that up, keep that going. So that way, for those of us who are suburbans, our main exposure, which is our pets, well, that stays as low as possible. The animals, they may come into contact. Well, there's not much we can do. I mean, there have been some cases where, here in the Midwest where it's skunks, areas where it's raccoons, and there's been a outbreak because they set up traps, they capture, they test. Well, what they'll do is they'll fly over certain regions, say here in Northern Virginia, because there's been a few raccoons in those woods in one of the the state or federal lands that they've been acting weird for that animal. They've been human attacks. They've captured some, they've tested some come up positive. So they will fly over in a helicopter and they'll dump pellets, food pellets. Not poison food pellets, no, no, no. Food pellets that have the vaccine in them. So they'll try to vaccinate certain regions. The vaccine doesn't last long, okay? Which is why Fifi and Fido have to be vaccinated every year. But it's enough to try to get ahead of this epidemic outbreak in that given, federal forest or that state land forest. Is it perfect? No, but it's the best we can do unless we're going to go out and wipe them all out and hope that they can repopulate. Now, as you notice, skunk, raccoon, fox. This doesn't list the bats because the bats, pretty much ubiquitous. But the predominant in the East Coast, raccoon. Here in the Midwest, from Texas on up through Canada, this is going to be the skunk. So around here, the skunk is going to be the number one, not the only carrier, not the only reservoir, but the number one carrier. You go out here into the West, you'll see that the fox is it. Keep in mind, rabies virus, it's a rhabdovirus, negative strand RNA virus. So it's a single strand negative sequence, the non-coding. It infects the central nervous system. Now, yes, you may get bit on your arm. Doesn't mean that, oh my God, so it's not my brain or my spine, I'm good. No, it's able to hijack some of the receptors, some of the cells, epithelial cells, some of the peripheral nerves. So it gets in deep tissue or even a shallow cut, infects epithelial cells, one goes in, some come out and spread, hits the peripheral nerve, goes up the axon to the nerve ganglia, then jumps. Goes to the spinal cord, goes to the brain. Now this is us warm-blooded animals, mammals. It is lethal in all organisms that get infected. Us, dogs, cats, foxes, skunks, whatever. Your textbook says 9 months. Okay, so that's why I put it there. I have read anywhere from 3 to 12. So it's a big range, But generally, when people start presenting symptoms, they actually by then have forgotten they even were bitten, if they even know they were bitten. Look at the symptoms. Virus hits the central nervous system, and that's why it takes many, many months, however many months you wanted to call it. Because remember, it's got to travel from the bite through the epithelial, the columnar, all those different epithelial cells to the peripheral nerve, move up over time, hit the ganglia, jump the ganglia to the central, move up the spine to the brain. Once there, fever, excitation. So that's why any animal you see that's jumpy, pupils basically dilated, they're blown. Salivating, anxiety, fear, swallowing, the hydrophobia. And yeah, the hydrophobia is real, which is kind of weird. And you can really notice this when it's an animal such as raccoons. Raccoons love water. Raccoons, it is true, raccoons will play in the water. They will wash their food before they eat it. And if they have rabies, they stay away from water. They will actually look oily and whatnot because they're stayed away from water so much, they're building up. The salivating, it turns out the virus has now traveled down the nerve ganglia to the salivary glands. Because remember, it is in the nerves, the neurons, hits the Nerves, because the salivary glands are innervated. You think food, you salivate, because those nerves. While they travel down to the nerves, to the saliva, they start foaming at the mouth. Think the movie Cujo from back in the 80s. Well, that's true. They start salivating because the nerve ganglia is hitting those salivary glands. Boom, 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 boom. They overproduce saliva, which comes out as foam, which then that foam is now billions of virus particles. So that if that animal goes and bites, that saliva will get in the wound, and the infection has now been spread to a new host. Here you're looking at a tissue sample from an infected animal. What the arrows are pointing at are what are referred to as Negri bodies. These are inclusions within the nerve cells, the neurons, where you get clumps of virus proteins. You get clumps of maturing viruses. So this is what they go and they look for. You can only find this in brain tissue. So this is going to have to be either autopsy if it's human or necropsy if it's an animal. So yeah, if they go and they have to test for rabies, they think an animal has rabies, it means yes, they're going to have to sacrifice it first and then take a brain sample. So it's tissue sample. You don't make antibodies to it. Under a normal infection. So they can't go through and test you, hey, do they have a high antibody titer? If yes, that means they have an active infection, so they got to take brain. Treatment, like I said, is immunization. They're going to give you the virus vaccine. It's an attenuated virus. Attenuated means it doesn't quite work right. So this is going to get in, it's going to infect, and it's going to slowly kind of make an infection, but not really. Mostly it's there so that your immune system can phagocytize it, present it to B cells, so the B cells can learn it and start making antibodies. Since we immunize your dog, your cat, even cattle, if you're on a farm, the horses, the pigs, the cows, the goats, everybody gets the rabies vaccine. This cuts down on the chances of them getting sick with it, because if they're out in the pastures, out in the fields, they're going to get attacked by something at some point in time. And it reduces our exposure. Here's the kicker. Untreated, it's 100% fatal. Yeah, this is actually the most deadly viral infection there is, the most deadly microbial infection there is. It's 100% fatal. Fewer than 5 cases a year in humans, thankfully, here in the States. Untreated, meaning they didn't get the vaccine in time, but there was some medical intervention once the symptoms begin to appear. This is one of those things, once the symptoms appear, generally the symptoms are due to altered brain chemistry, if not brain damage. So, in recorded medical history, I think here in Western world, that's US, Europe, I want to say it's less than 10, I think it is, less than 12 people have survived rabies. Yeah, less than a dozen over hundreds of years of record keeping. Thousands and thousands of people every year were being exposed up until we had the rabies vaccine. All those people are dying except for these 10 or 12. What's so special about these 10 or 12? Last minute medical intervention. There was in the news a few years ago, a teenage girl um, started showing the symptoms. When they, quizzed the parents finally remembered there was a bat got into the house. She helped get rid of it. She may have, she doesn't even know if she got bit or not because it doesn't have to be that deep. Started showing the symptoms like 6 months later. It's at the hospital now. There's nothing they can do under normal conditions. It's just time to start making funeral arrangements. Um, Medical intervention here was they induced a coma and they put her body in a um, hyperthermic state or hypothermic. They cooled her way down. They allowed her body to fight the infection, and the cold minimized brain damage, the continuation of the brain damage. So she lived. I think she was like 15-ish or so. And over the next few years, she got to relearn to walk, talk, feed herself, tie her shoes. So yeah, there was quite a bit of brain damage, but she's alive. And that's generally been the case for anybody who has survived. It's because of extreme medical intervention, and there has always been quite a bit of brain damage. So, moral of the story, when in doubt, get the shots.